Maria Laura Arabbo, I'm so happy to have time with you today. This is our Voices of Inclusion conversation. And like I was telling you right before we started recording, yes, we've sent you the questions ahead of time. Maybe you've thought about them, maybe you haven't. We'll see where we go today. Like we haven't rehearsed any of this, and maybe we do one question, maybe we do all of them, maybe we do none of them. Let's see where we go. Okay. So actually, right before we hit record, you said, the name Maria Laura Arabbo carries a lot of weight. I want to understand the significance of it to you and what it means at this point in time for you.
That is a good question, and I'm glad it wasn't on the original list of questions. When I first came to the U.S., obviously my full name is Maria Laura Arabbo, as you beautifully said it, and my mother's name is Maria Alicia Arabbo. And so when we came to the U.S., we were told upon arriving at the airport on our way from Chicago to Minnesota, that which is where I grew up, that we needed to shift our names, because in the United States you can only have one first name, not the traditional Latino Maria Laura, Maria Alicia. And so my mom's name, Maria Alicia, she chose Maria as her first name. I chose Laura. And until I was 19, I was known as Laura. And then I moved to Boston and I went to study at a university there. And when I did that, a gentleman asked me, "What is your actual name? Because I see you using Maria Laura. And which do you prefer?" And so at that time, having a little baby crush on this person, I said, "What do you want it to be?" And he goes, "I think Maria is great." And so I went with Maria. And since then, I've really had a lot of questions come up in my life, because I often write Maria Laura and trying to re-own and reclaim this thing that was given to me by no choice of my own. But the fact that we are in this country as immigrants, and I've been here since I was 8, so I've been here most of my life. But this idea that we find ways to mold ourselves and acclimate to the larger society by using my full name when I can, it feels like I'm claiming back a little bit of my heritage and my story. And that feels really important and really, really true to who I am. So there we have it.
Thank you. I didn't know that about you. And what's going on in my head is, how could I not have known that about you when I've known you for so long? So, okay, here's the thing. In these conversations, I like to go under the waterline, for a variety of reasons. One, to model to our followers how to go under the waterline, because under the waterline, there's like much more richness, much more truth, much more vulnerability, much more courage. So it means we're both going to have to get courageous and vulnerable in this conversation, if you're willing to do that. So are you willing to do that?
Absolutely.
I know you, and I know that the answer is almost always yes, but I need to
Yes.
do it for this conversation. So what was coming to me was like, how did I not know this? And I'm just curious if you would be willing to share how we know each other and what our history is.
For sure.
Speaking of going under the waterline.
100%. I love this. Gosh, I don't even know how long it's been, so you'll have to help me with that. But I want to say it was 2018, 2019 that I applied for an executive director role, at which you held a board leadership role. And during this interview process, we got to know each other over the phone. And I remember feeling an instant connection with you, not really knowing why. And obviously, wanting to lead in this role. Ultimately, I didn't get the role. You reached out to me, which I felt was serendipitous, a few months later, inviting me to an event that you were going to have some folks. It was another nonprofit that you were supporting that had helped you along the way. And all this to say, I remember meeting you for the first time at this gala event, and another colleague, Alejandra, and feeling instant connection, and finding that, through that time frame, which ended up being the pandemic and a lot of other things, I wanted to be close to you and in your sphere in some way, without necessarily understanding why I felt this immense sense of affinity to you and your work. Obviously, now that I know you and as I've gotten to know you more, it makes a lot of sense. You're somebody that I look up to. You're somebody that I admire. You're somebody that I find brilliant, and in so many other ways. And I've introduced you to as many people as I possibly can. But since getting to know you and then getting a chance to work with RoundTable, when you invited me while standing at a taco line, knowing that I did some facilitation work, but not entirely sure if that was what I wanted to do. I remember you said you want to come and join Roundtable, and I don't think I hesitated. I think I said yes right away. Um, and that experience really opened up my eyes. I think being a part of your work, Roundtable's work, meeting the colleagues of Roundtable, the folks that work there, has literally opened up my life in a whole different channel where I'm now able to lean into this vision of a life that includes courageous conversations and being the bridge builder that I have always wanted and have inherently been in many ways. Allows me to do that in practice, allows me to eke a living out of it, allows me to be in rooms with folks where conversations are had that should be had everywhere all the time, especially now. And I think, yeah, I mean, to me, I'm super grateful for our friendship, first and foremost, but also our professional connection. And then whatever ways we continue to work together in the future. I mean, I recently finished the CTI Coactive Leadership Program, in essence, as a result of you, to be fair, you and other folks from Roundtable. Um, I'm getting into coaching and doing, coach training and working with coaches, and it's all of that is a new space. Plus, all the facilitation will work with you, with other organizations. It really actually is a result of that phone call that you and I had when we first connected for this ED role that I didn't even get. So, funny how life works.
It's funny. First of all, it's very rewarding to hear your perspective on how Roundtable has maybe been an inflection point or opened up perspective for you. So I definitely want to dig in there and to hear your perspective, like honestly, I think for the first time about our relationship, because for me, it's similar and a little different. And so Shannon, who, as you know, is our office administrator and my Jill of all trades and my right hand, um, Shannon was working at Girl Forward for some time. And as a board member of Girl Forward, your name came up many times. Shannon and Ariel, who were um, working with you, I think your role was in Austin Independent School District.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, she's awesome. You should meet her. You will love her. So I had an impression of you before I even
Oh,
thought to meet you. And I thought we had actually connected before you applied for the ED role. And I was just trying to find a way for us to meet in person. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen until we were at the Austin Asian Family Services of
AFSA.
Austin,
Mm-hmm.
the AFSA Gala, which was another local nonprofit that had been really helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I introduced you to Alejandra, my very, very close friend. And you guys hit it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which also has led to my current role at Vecina, if you think about it. So it's all
Yeah, yeah, it's all.
weirdly connected to you, Priya.
Well, I love that. Okay, so you said that Roundtable opened up something for you,
Sure.
and I'm curious what that was. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that it's being a part of Roundtable has given me the opportunity to do some of the facilitation work in spaces where difficult conversations can arise. And because of the opportunity to be in those spaces, it allowed me to explore that hunch that I've had about myself that this is an area of comfort and of ease of working within courageous conversations that to actually see it in play. And when we've had different incredible work that we've done, with Cross or other work with even the smaller team, the ability to be in spaces where we're discussing a variety of different topics that then elicits a little bit of pushback and a little bit of curiosity and questioning really ignited in me this like, oh, I'm here for this. I love the growth. I love the dialogue. And was so indicative of literally my entire career. So my entire career has either been in education. Previously, actually, it was in media and communications as a photographer. And it was always focused on conversations around either immigration, refugee related work. But specifically, I seem to shine at the points of inflection where you might have a little bit of challenge. I specifically recall an incident that happened in AISD when I was running the refugee support office, where I did have somebody call after I had, given an article interview to Austin American Statesman, just talking about some ways in which the district could better support the refugees we had, recently enrolled. And this individual really pushed back, called very angry and said, like, they really need to figure it out on their own. We shouldn't even have families like this here. There was a lot of an exchange, a heated exchange, mostly me listening and her letting me know her opinions. And in that moment, I heard this potential possibility to actually get to know her a little better and explore this reasoning why maybe she felt this way. So I actually invited her to become a volunteer for the school district and to work directly with refugee students and families, because she had a history of being a teacher. So she really wanted to engage. And a big part of her initial kind of frustration with what I had said in this news piece had to do with the fact that she had never met somebody that came through the refugee resettlement process. And 9 months later, after her volunteer experiment we'll call it, because we weren't sure how she would take it, she really grew close to this individual student at the elementary school. And she ended up being a really strong advocate going forward, with refugee related policies that would come up at the Capitol. That experience I had many, many years ago, I think, allowed me to see that there's a lot of potential for cross dialogue and for engagement, and that the desire to maybe put our heads in the sand and say they are, or they see things different and it can't be helped, is not within my DNA. And I think Roundtable certainly allowed me to see a little glimpse of that, but it expanded my ability to do more of this work in the community, to just dialogue with folks. I live in Temple, Texas. I have a lot of dialogues with folks here. I obviously, the work that I do, at Vecina, it definitely allows me to just engage in the possibility and the hopefulness that there is a way to bridge any kind of divides. Because at the end of the day, I believe that beyond any kind of differentiation of left or right or whatever differences we may have, there's a deep sense of longing and belonging that can happen between humans regardless. And I've seen it. And I think that Roundtable really was the first sort of drop in the bucket for me to go, hey, there's a way to maybe explore some leadership work where these topics come up. Explore coaching relationships where folks are actively grappling with these issues, both at home and in the workplace. And so, in a way, it's been a bit of a life changer, I'd say.
For me too. I couldn't have planned that, but I really do think we do things a little bit differently. So when I was, sometimes it's easier in retrospect to look back and say, oh yeah, that was all deliberate, but I don't think it was. A lot of it was luck. I wanted a diverse team, but as I was building the team, I really wanted people who were not afraid of resistance. So if you remember when I interviewed you, I resisted you a lot, and I wanted to just see, how do you facilitate through that? How do you stay in the conversation? What happens to your guards? What happens to your courage? What happens to mine? Are we able to stay in this conversation through resistance? Because I know that if we can, we both stand to reach shared potential and shared wisdom together, which we wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't resisted. So resistance like this woman showed you, I think, is always a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, this, I don't use words like always and never, but I do use it here in the sense of resistance, because we tend to, when we experience resistance, feel threatened, put our guards up, minimize ourselves, dismiss ourselves. And Roundtable is saying, no, this is the moment to amplify.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad that you found ways outside of Roundtable to use that. And it makes me wonder about you. This is a big question, Maria, but I'm sort of like, what do you have to believe about yourself and the world in order to welcome resistance and to welcome challenge?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a tough question to answer on the spot, but let's see. I think coming from a different country, from Argentina, I think, being raised in rural Minnesota of all places, where I certainly experienced like otherizing, where people were like, "Who are you?" I showed up as the first non-English speaking student in the history of the entire school district in 1990. So that should say a lot about,
Wow, really?
yeah, the ways in which like things have shifted, right? Like
Yeah.
we showed up, we were immigrants in this particular town and in Andover, Minnesota, and there was I remember the teachers didn't know what to do. The professor,
Yeah.
Mr. Jurek, was like, what? I'm sorry. And we had to have an interpreter come with us to the schools. My mother sat, she spoke a little bit of English she was an adult, obviously, when we came here, and they taught a little bit of English in Argentina. And so she would sit at the desk next to me my first week in school as my interpreter because we didn't know how to manage that. That experience was actually super pivotal because of the fact that there was an initial rejection and then a tremendous amount of acceptance and almost support as
Hmm.
I, jumped right in. I'm
Yeah.
very
And
happily,
how old were you?
I was 7, 8. I was
Okay, so
7 and 8.
developmentally, we also don't know any better but to do what the adults around us
Of course.
implicitly. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I will say that, my intrinsic motivation to succeed was definitely kicked into high gear then. And so to your point, like because I was getting, positive affirmations from folks around me, because I remember I started in the gifted and talented program 1 year later after learning the language within 6 months. You're a kid, you learn it fast, especially if you're, in this space where you must. I began to really chase down this desire to be a part of the fabric around me, rural Minnesota, the United States, all of these things. And so that experience of maybe the rejection to acceptance certainly has led me to feel hopeful about not just my capacity, but everyone's capacity to work through that resistance on this notion that the humanity between us is first and foremost what connects us.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, since then I've had tons of experiences that have kind of better and more accurately informed that. I've traveled a lot. I lived in China, where I was obviously never going to be a local, but even that experience was bridging language, cultural differences and customs, and living there for 9, 10 months. I mean, that experience really opened up my eyes to what it's like to still always not quite be a part of, but still have
Yeah.
a lot of connection and community and building and belonging. And I think as I've gotten older, my compass, my sense of identity has really solidified in the notion that if there's anything I want to do in this world, it is to be a bridge. It is to be a connector. And because I have these pivotal experiences throughout my life that have shown that we can do that, I think it's important. I mean, I'll even bring in a really, really personal piece here. Like I'm married to somebody from the opposite side of the political spectrum. And for us, especially in 2025 US, like that is an unusual. I don't know a lot of other folks in this scenario. I'm sure there are lots. I just don't know them. And I know that as we navigate our relationship through some really important differences, we always say, like, what brings us together is our love. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
we can be angry, we can discuss politics, we can discuss policy, sure, and we're not going to agree. But there's always this very strong tether of love and care. And I know the kind of human that he is with me and with others, and vice versa, that it breaks down all of that other noise, which I think is mostly noise. So
Yeah.
me, I have a lot of hope that if I'm
Yeah.
able to do this, and if I've had these experiences, there are ways to bring the country and the world together. And it sounds really, it sounds very hopeful as I hear myself say it out loud.
You have to have that. So a couple of things in reaction to that. I'm starting to think that the more those of us who have experienced lots of resistance in our lives, um, are better at navigating it. Maybe better prepared.
Mhm.
to face it, to work through it. You know, resistance happens everywhere, every moment. Um, and we just have had to become brave in the face of it and not take it personally. And that's one thing about you, Maria, is I've noticed you don't take resistance personally. It's not a personal threat, or at least it doesn't appear to be a personal threat to you when there is resistance in the system. And I see leaders take it personally all the time. And I don't blame them because I think sometimes we're primed for that. We live in a society where competition is key and productivity and all these things are key. You have to be the best, you have to be the winner. So a threat to that can feel like your entire identity is about to crumble.
Mhm.
But standing ground in who you are means you don't take resistance personally, but you take the relationship personally and you work through, using humanity as the vector, I think.
Yeah.
And your relationship with your husband, I agree, has been for me like a source of reflection. I'm like, what is, because I know him, not
Uh-huh.
well, but I know him. And you're right, in that all I can see is the good human, the caring, generous, kind, loving individual that he is, and the way he treats you. And uh it's dissonance for me, right? And many people to be like, wait a second, you're all these things, because we have an assumption that if you have an opposing view to me, you must not be a
Yeah.
kind, loving human. We couldn't be further from right on that. It's such a good example for all of us, your relationship with him, and how it's not always easy.
Mm-mm. It's definitely not always easy. But I think I look at differing opinions, resistance. There's always sort of, I'll call it symptomatic, meaning like the first thing that you see, that's the resistance. That's a symptom of a context. We're raised in context, our history, where we were raised, who we were raised by, who we encountered, what systems we entered in. Like if you entered into the military versus became, I don't know, an elementary school teacher, how did those two career professions impact you? I believe that the resistance that we're talking about here is a lot more nuanced when you really start to take into consideration the contextual pieces that are and make up our identity. And to be fair, identity is also in
Well,
fluctuation.
and this is a complicated question. And when you talk about how does Roundtable coach, we go to those very complicated identity questions, not just, hey, fill in the blank, I am blank. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, earlier this week I had a client who's approaching 50, still has half his life ahead of him, but feels that he has accomplished everything he needs to and is not sure what's next. And
Wow.
he's like, the scariest thing that could happen to me is stagnation.
Yeah.
But I've grown and I've done all this thing. We had this like very, very vulnerable and intense conversation about that need to feel more, to do more, to achieve more is not you. It's a reflection of the society and the capitalism and the patriarchy and all of these things. You're a product of that. And so it was like, well, who am I without that?
Mhm.
And how do I discover myself without those systems? It doesn't work like that, buddy. You're in those systems, right?
Sounds like a fascinating conversation. Yes.
Fascinating.
Great
Yeah.
session. Yeah. And to be fair, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually just, I think, have recently been untangling some of that, not because I feel like I've accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. So that's a different approach. But I had recently transitioned from a previous executive director role into a space of not knowing what was next. And it was in that space, in that gap of looking at, well, who am I and what is my identity if I'm not productive, if I'm not, productive in the traditional sense,
No kidding. Yeah.
if I'm not a person with a title that is of a certain, level, right, within an organization. If you're out in social spaces, what's the first question you get in the United States? It'll be, what do you do for work? That's
Yeah.
generally the first question.
Yeah.
When I lived in
Yeah.
Boston, it was usually what school are you going to or did you go to? So it depends on
Totally.
where you
Yes.
are.
Yes.
And, through this experience of really trying to understand and disentangle my own identity from my professional lane, which it had been, forever, I had the opportunity to do coactive leadership training through CTI, and it happened to be in Spain that I needed to attend the trainings. And that experience, not just because of the program itself and the curriculum itself with behind the program, but that experience of also doing it in Europe, it really opened up my eyes to the ways in which we are such products of context of our society, of the system. And I remember being shocked when we entered into our first retreat in Spain, and there's people from all over the world. They're all really high-powered folks, though none of them ever asked each other, "What do you do for work?" It was never a part of the
Mm.
conversation. And I'm saying this over 9 months. The professional identity was the least of our work in this leadership work we were doing. That made a big difference for me in understanding that who I am, what my own kind of life purpose is, can be expressed in a multitude of ways, which brings me back to roundtable conversation of how I think roundtable planted that seed and where I've landed now. So that when
Mhm.
I look back, in fact, I had my last coaching session yesterday with my coach, who we've been working together for 11 months. She's like, this is the arc for you, for understanding that you are so much more than a professional title that is ascribed to you that may or may not be understood by the folks in your society around you.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've landed in a similar role after the fact, and I'm still kind of navigating with, yes, engage, give your all, but don't over identify, don't over invest unless it's really truly heart aligned, passion aligned, and also aligned to meet the moment. And that is obviously that's something I'm still exploring, but I just wanted to. I was really touched by the conversation you shared with your coaching client.
It's a developmental question, right? So I believe that inclusion means we get to define ourselves on our terms. When we are truly included, it means we get that privilege. But it is developmental, meaning that where I am today is not where I'm going to be 10 years from now. And I may define myself quite differently in 10 years because my contacts and my relationships and my understanding of myself is going to evolve in 10 years.
Yeah.
And so it's moving, which makes it frustrating because I'm like, I really want to understand who I am so that I can leverage it and be of service to the world, but it's going to change. So how do I amplify? How do I maximize my potential? Which I'm starting to think is also a question that is a product of the
100%.
capitalist structure that we live in.
100%. I think the only thing we can ever be certain of is uncertainty and the fact that we've got this moment, this very moment right here, right now, and then it's gone and that's it. Like there's for me at least, certainly this last year has been about getting really comfortable with uncertainty and getting comfortable with not knowing what's next and being able to sit with that. Talk about being comfortable with resistance, sure, but being comfortable with not knowing what my life will look like for the next X amount of time. It's been an interesting kind of challenge, and knowing that retroactively looking back now, saying you got through it. There were a lot of ups and downs through that process. Was really, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. This I want to say
Uncertainty is a basic human need.
it
We need
is.
uncertainty in our lives. That meta-analysis from years ago about what, if you took all the research on human needs and boiled it down into 6 things, uncertainty is the second one. We have to wake up knowing that tomorrow is going to be different than today. That's uncertainty.
Yeah,
But we also have to know that we're going to wake up tomorrow, which is certainty. We have a need for both, which are polar opposites,
right.
right? So we can never have enough of either one as long as we need the other.
Totally. Well, and there's uncertainty and certainty, but someone like me has always gone around saying I'm comfortable with change. I'm the human that's like lived all over. I like to move every year. I don't even like consistency in my home base, even though I purchased property. Like here we are. However, I've recognized that there's change that is brought about myself, the decisions that I can make that throw me into change, which in and of itself is a bit of an advantage, right? Because I'm mentally prepared for that which I am now, being the agent that is creating the change. So if I say I'm going to move tomorrow, I'm creating that. The uncertainty that I think I've forgotten or am working with is understanding that there's a lot that I don't know and can't know and need to find peace with that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a universal challenge. I
Or
think
not find peace with it. Let's get fucking messy with it. I mean, why not?
I guess that's true too.
Yeah.
And I also want to honor that there's a ton of privilege in what I'm saying, right? Like I have a tremendous amount of
You
privilege.
do that. I noticed that you short circuit to that sometimes, right? You short
Sure.
circuit to this, like, oh, wait a second, I'm speaking from a place of privilege. Sure. And from a place of having gone through marginalization yourself too, right? You've gone through, and I understand what you're saying. I understand, like, you're situating the narrative in a context of privilege. Sure, I get that. I get that. And it's not like I just want to be careful that we're not so reductive
Sure.
in defining why I'm saying this or justifying it.
Yeah,
You know?
that's fair. That's definitely fair.
So, you are the executive director of Vicina. You are a facilitator and coach with RoundTable. You are a friend, and this conversation is reminding me why you're in my inner circle. Um, you're a good, you're a citizen. You're all these things. And I know that over the past year, you've experienced lots of crossroads.
Mhm.
Today, on this day, what crossroads are you at in your life?
Yeah. Uh, I am, I think I'm at a crossroads trying to understand. Uh, it's actually related to meeting you, funny enough. Working with Roundtable, which then opened up my space to work with other organizations doing similar and or different work. I've been doing a lot of learning and design and development work, organizational change work. I had a chance to train and expand my thinking both with via character strengths as well as CTI. And then, of course, I'm back into what I'm going to consider a really traditional approach to a professional identity, which is a like full-time salaried role. I think I'm at that crossroads of trying to figure out how to marry it all and still go to sleep at night. I think that's the crossroad that I'm like, but there is a life that allows for, I will say that my work with you and then what's happened over the last 11 months allowed me to like really dig into creativity I didn't even know I had, to explore angles I didn't know I had, to dig into AI I didn't know I was interested in. I mean, there were so many different angles that I started to take when I had that kind of expansiveness in my life and also the container to explore it. And now I'm in this role that's really intensive that I love, and I love the work and the mission, but I can sense that it's really hard to continue to do that kind of exploratory, life affirming piece. And so what I'm trying to figure out is where do those two marry and how?
Yeah. Oh, I want to talk to you so much more about this. And not to make it about me, but that's what I'm doing right now.
I
It's
know.
validating for me to hear that you are seeing what I have seen in you for at least 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Your potential to serve and your capacity to serve and invite people into essential conversations, into windows of seeing who they truly are and who they can be. Um, and it's like, it's time, man. Like it was like 7 years ago, it was time.
Um,
You're, I think, collecting the tools, the
mhm.
mechanics to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But your heart has always been doing it. And perhaps these tools can make you more effective or something at it.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to continue that conversation with you because you have a power and a responsibility, but also a gift, I think.
I appreciate that. I really have loved the work that I've done, and the feedback has always been positive, actually, even when it has been
Yeah,
met
of
with
course,
resistance.
because it's perfectly aligned.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. It is, and I think too, I want to kind of harken back to the beginning of our conversation. maybe it is my immigrant narrative origin story, but there is this sense of, the financial safety that one can have
Sure. Yep,
from a
I
more
get it.
traditional professional approach versus this like exciting entrepreneurial side that I've always had that also sees it as there's a lot of unknown there, right? There's a lot of unknown of how you're gonna, especially when you're starting out. And I am very curious about it. I will say that I am now a lot more like, lots of people do this. Why not? And I'm excited by it. I think coupled with like a good dose of fear behind it versus before, maybe even a year ago, where I would have been like, I
No
don't,
way.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, what is an unknown for you is a known for me. I'm gonna just, I'm not you, Maria, but I just know things about you. And it's part of the reason I'm pushing you
yeah,
to move into that part
yeah,
of you
for sure.
because you've expressed enthusiasm for it, which, as you know, is one of our company values, enthusiasm. So when I hear a facilitator enthusiastic about something, my responsibility is to nurture it.
Yeah,
But also you have the talent and the skill and the drive, I think, and the support to do it.
yeah.
One question we ask everybody,
Mhm.
which I always love seeing where people take this, is what's a semi-big decision you have to make in the next month?
This is a really random. Gosh, there's quite a few, unfortunately. Obviously, there's the professional decisions around how to support an organization through some, challenging times in terms of fiscal challenges. There's that. That's the professional side. The personal side, just to be extra transparent, I think I am debating what I want from my life geographically. And my husband and I have always wanted, he'll retire in whatever, 5, 6 years from law enforcement, which is great. And we've been wanting to move abroad, but there's this time in between that I need to decide with as a family, and with everything that's happening, like, do we, where do I move? What do I do? I mean, Temple, Texas has been a really lovely place. The folks here are incredibly kind and caring, actually, but it isn't really my place. And so I think the big decision I'm trying to figure out, and I know it's super personal, but it's like, do we move? And if so, do we buy? Do we rent? And where do we move? And what's the community we want? And what's the lifestyle we're looking for? Because um, I've noticed that community is really important to my health, my wellness, well-being, my everything. But it's not just that. I've also noticed that I'm really well suited for engaging directly with the community. And in a role as an executive director, you're really pretty far removed. And so I'm trying to find that sweet spot. Again, this is probably why I enjoyed the roundtable facilitations and other facilitations, because I'm maybe not in person with a lot of folks, but I'm engaging with a wide range of folks and a large number of people. Um, I think we're trying to kind of slowly figure that out and, figure out what next moves we want to make, because I think the impact will be way larger than 5 years. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I'm kind of observing and watching and seeing, like, what is going to happen long term, and where do I want to be. It seems like a strange question, but it's something that we're working on literally this month.
Doesn't seem strange to me. It feels very relevant contextually, speaking of context. It
Yeah,
feels really juicy. It feels like you can't get it right and you can't get it wrong, which makes it an important but also unimportant decision, right? Like, I love, you know me, I love playing in polarities of
yeah,
questions like these, right? Let's impose a lot of urgency and importance on this decision. Let's play that out. But now let's impose a lot of ambiguity on this decision
sure.
and see what we come up with, right? Like, can we be really, truly creative about this which means we're going to have to take fear, put it here temporarily for a little bit, take our limiting beliefs, put it here just for a little bit, take our empowered beliefs and put those here just for a little bit, and get really just creative with equanimity around it.
Yeah, that sounds nice, Priya. Not sure how to approach it, but yeah, that sounds like
I
a
know I live in a different, I live
I
in this like very idealistic, but I think that it's a question I ask myself a lot. And like you, I short circuit for me to, hey, wait a second, my community is here, my family is here, and Austin might not have been the place that I would have ever picked
Mhm,
or made any logical sense, but my people are here.
mhm,
I can call up 10 people and one of them will show up in 10 minutes for me.
mhm.
I didn't have that in any, you and I both lived in Boston. I didn't have that there. I didn't have that anywhere else in the world where I have lived, and I've lived in many, many places. I don't think that's Austin. It's like what I've built,
Sure.
but it's everything.
It really is. It really is it's also because it's what I really love about at least my understanding of marriage, especially because I was married at an older age, is that like my partner isn't my go-to for everything. And it's the community that I've created, my chosen family. I mean, I have family in Minnesota, I have family out in Sudbury, Mass. Like I have family everywhere, but here, my chosen family, in addition to my husband, is a huge part of my sounding board. It's a huge
Yeah, me
part.
too. Me
Yeah.
too. It's my
Yeah.
heartbeat. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that part has been a really, maneuvering through some of the questions I've been exploring in sense of identity without having that 10 minutes away has been not ideal. And I think we've managed as we do. My husband says you're a fighter no matter what. But at the same time, I think I'd like to get really clear on like, okay, what is really best for me, for us as a family, and where. We'll see. I guess we will see in the next couple of weeks.
I'm eager to hear how this conversation evolves, and I truly do hope I can be supportive to you as you
Sure.
think about that.
For
Yeah.
sure. I would love that.
Is there anything else you'd like to share? Any websites, anything you'd like to promote, anything you'd like to leave viewers with?
Um, Obviously, I know this was part of your work, but I will continue to say that how much Roundtable has impacted me personally and professionally, and that will continue. Vecina, the organization that I support, I think we're doing a lot of really important work, timely work, um, really getting creative about how to support the community. And I'd love to highlight, our website, vecina.org. Pretty simple, Vecina, Vecina, for those who don't speak Spanish, stands for neighbor in Spanish. I think those are the main pieces that I wanted to highlight at the moment. But if we were to do this again in a year, which I hope we do, who knows? I think a lot's going to change in a year, and that part is exciting. And I'm super thankful to have you both in my corner and my circle for that. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
me too. Let me stop the recording.
Thanks.